Introducing a new era for discerning Australian investors. Brought to you by Ausbiz and backed by deep market insight, professional analysis and a proven track record. Our focus is simple: to connect you with exclusive and compelling investment opportunities. Discover what's next at ausbizcapital.com.au.
Hello and welcome to the Global View on this Friday. I'm Andrew Gagan. Good to have you with us. So let's check what happened overnight. Global stocks mostly higher as markets considered the court battle over President Trump's reciprocal tariffs. So US stocks ended slightly higher following an appeals court ruling that reinstated most of those tariffs, with investors seemingly unfazed by the development. However, it was Nvidia's result that buoyed the market, having reported upbeat sales results driven by customers stockpiling AI chips ahead of those US export restrictions on China. Checking in on the other Mag 7 stocks, Amazon was the pick of the bunch there, Apple and Alphabet finishing lower. Shares of PC maker HP fell heavily after it cut its annual profit forecast as it expects a moderation in PC market growth. Meanwhile, Dell raising its annual profit forecast, signalling growing demand for its AI-powered servers that are equipped with Nvidia's chips, sending the computer hardware maker's shares up 10% in extended trade. Boeing rose on plans to increase production of its best-selling 737 MAX jet. And among the retailers, shares of department store chain Coles rose after posting a smaller quarterly loss than its previous forecast, while electronics retailer Best Buy fell as it cut its annual forecast amid looming concerns about tariff uncertainty. And US listed shares of global mining giants Rio and BHP were up marginally. Well, the US Federal Appeals Court has reinstated the most sweeping of President Trump's tariffs a day after a trade court had ruled that it exceeded his authority in imposing those duties. The court directed the plaintiffs to respond by June 5th and the Trump administration by June 9th, with the administration saying they expected either to prevail on appeal or employ other presidential powers to ensure the tariffs go into effect. Meanwhile, President Trump has called Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell to the White House for their first face-to-face meeting since he took office. White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt saying the president did say that he believes the Fed chair is making a mistake by not lowering interest rates, which is putting us at an economic disadvantage to China and other countries. Well, revised read on US GDP in the first quarter has been taken down to negative 0.3%, from negative 0.3 to plus 0.2% annualised, while personal consumption was cut to 1.2% and the core PCE deflator falling from 3.5 to 3.4%. US Treasury yields, they fell on soft economic data and on the back of that court ruling blocking most of President Trump's tariffs. The US two-year Treasury yield falling to 3.93%, the 10-year, down to 4.42. And the US dollar fell on the prospect of a drawn-out court battle over Trump's tariffs. The Aussie trading at 64.4 US cents. Bitcoin is also lower, falling below 106,000 US dollars. Oil prices, they've retreated from earlier gains on renewed uncertainty over those tariffs. Brent crude futures down more than 1% at $64 a barrel. Copper little changed, iron ore rising about 1% to $98 a tonne, and gold gained about 1% to $3,318 an ounce. All right, so let's get across particularly what's moving global markets in the wake of this drama that's unfolding in the courts over Trump's tariffs. Greg Boland joining us from Tiger Brokers. Greg, welcome back to Ausbiz. Thanks for joining us. As an investor, this just makes it even more complicated, doesn't it? Because they're on again, they're off again, these tariffs. How did you see that market response to this unfolding drama, if you like?
Yeah, so in terms of the drama, the US Court of International Trade ruled that the bulk of Trump's new import tariffs were issued illegally because the administration wrongly invoked this emergency law to justify them, while the Federal Appeals Court paused that ruling pretty quickly afterwards, and so the market initially rallied quite hard in the aftermarket or overnight market, as the investors sort of cheered the federal court or trade court decision. But obviously, again, that moved to a fairly mooted response, given that there's been a pause on appeal. So it's been an interesting session where most people, woke up this morning thinking, well, the market must have rallied, but then, it hasn't occurred because of the separate court ruling. So
Yeah,
again, an off again, on again thing.
Well,
so
indeed.
Now the court's doing it rather than Trump doing it.
Yeah, well, but Greg, it just adds to that uncertainty, doesn't it? So, I guess what's the playbook from here? Because, and as the administration has made clear, look, they're going to do what it takes to keep these tariffs in place.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and it's a matter of Trump's all the way along has been using a stick and carrot approach to really, I'm going to bring in big tariffs against you, come and negotiate with me, and I'll then throw a carrot at you to help negotiations. And he did the same thing with the EU last week, where the EU came in with what would most people would have thought a reasonable set of changes to that Trump should have accepted, but then he threw his toys out and threatened 50% tariffs on EU late last week, but then shelved them until 9th of July. So the market on Friday after hours late last week was definitely going to be under threat, whereas this week it sort of rallied on the Monday because on the Tuesday, because the Memorial Day was closed, but on the Tuesday the market rallied a couple of percent. So the on again off again thing has been quite interesting, and a US journalist has coined the phrase taco, which is, journalists and also the markets always throw these acronyms in, and taco stands for Trump always chickens out, which obviously he's taken great offence to, but it is what's happening.
Indeed, it is the taco trade, supposedly. But all that considered, Greg, markets remain remarkably buoyant at this point. I see you also point out that US stock option volumes continue to surge.
Yeah. So US stock options have been around since 1973, when the Chicago Board Options Exchange launched these products, and year to date till end of April, so compared to last year, stock options volume is up 25%. ETF options around 23%, and index options around 15% . So the idea or the notion of stock options has been around, as I said, for a long time. So options as they are refer to the notion that a buyer has a right to do something, either buy shares if they have got a call, or deliver shares if they have bought a put option, and each option is on 100 shares. And these volumes continue to surge. Open interest and daily average volume is at all-time highs.
Now, Greg, the other event overnight that certainly buoyed the market was that Nvidia result, actually reported the previous session, but after the bell. So this was the time for the market to react. What did you make of that result?
Well, so definitely there was it was interesting in terms of Nvidia came out, and it was really the first chance the market had really looked at the effect of restrictions on chip exports to China. The financial result came out after the bell. The market was up 3.25% at the close today, but in the after hours market it was up 5.5% to nearly 6%. So it definitely was a good result. But again, the court ruling, and also people having a look through at the result of this ban on US chips into China and how that might affect the company's growth, has definitely affected the price a little bit. It should have rallied a lot more than what it did. But one of the guidances were that their Q2 guidance for revenue was 45 billion versus 45.9 billion that people thought. but this includes a $8 billion hit on these chip restrictions. So, the whole premise of exporting H20 chips to China and that being banned has definitely affected Nvidia's forward pricing.
Now, elsewhere, Greg, perhaps to the positive as far as investors are concerned for those in Tesla, Elon Musk has now left the inner circle of the White House. Of course,
Yeah.
so those investors, those shareholders of Tesla have been crying out for him to actually concentrate or retake the wheel of Tesla because they feel as though he's taken his eye off the ball while he's been busy with Doge. So what do you see as the likely outcome of that? Perhaps now he's going to turn his attention back to the corporate entities.
Well, probably cheers from people in Washington that he's left the building, but also cheers within the shareholders of Tesla, and that's definitely pushed the stock up in the past 5 days. It's up around 7%. Earlier in the year, it was down nearly 49% year to date, and at the moment, it is down around 11%. So it's definitely rallied a lot since its low, 2 or 3 months ago.
All right. Any other stocks that you're watching at the moment? I guess you would look at those so-called Batman stocks.
Yeah, one of the Batman stocks that everyone sort of forgets about it, and it's the lowest in terms of that. The Batman stocks are really all the $1 trillion stocks. The B is in Batman is Broadcom, and it reports next week. So in the same way that the chip makers, Nvidia, have reported pretty good results, Broadcom is also a chip maker, and it reports next week. Year to date, it's up around 4.4%. So it'll be interesting to see whether it rallies further on its result. And in the last 5 days, are up around 5.3%. So it's one of those stocks that everyone talks about, Microsoft and Apple and Amazon and Alphabet, etc. But Broadcom is the recent addition to it was the Mag 7 and it's now Batman because the eighth stock is Broadcom, and so its result next week will be a interesting bellwether for the chip market as well.
Greg, great you can get across what you're seeing on Wall Street at the moment. Thanks for joining us in Tiger Brokers.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's refocus then on what we're going to see locally when we get going on this Friday. SPI futures indicating we will be getting lower off by around 1/5%. Stay with us. We're going to get across that in just a couple of minutes' time.